Okay, so it's Friday. It's you hangout time, and I'm joined by my good friend and lovely Frenchman, Stephan. How are you doing, Stephan?
I'm fine.
Good, good. How's Paris today?
Paris is grey and rainy.
Oh, that's a shame.
Yeah.
So obviously, as always, we do kind of a bit of introductions. Maybe you can give us kind of your background and how you got involved with Umbraco, Stephan.
I got actually involved in 2008 working with a customer who wanted a CMS on Microsoft.NET. So we
Okay.
looked for solutions, and Umbraco was the flagship solution at that time. And so I started to use it and install it for that customer. And then I started to get annoyed by things that were not working the way I wanted them to work. So I started to fix things.
Yep.
And when V6 was launched as a project, when 5 got killed, I got more and more involved into fixing before and adding new things, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah.
And finally, I joined HQ part-time 6 months ago in January to keep doing that work on core. So it's basically a lot of cleanup. Today we're going to show new features, but most of the work is cleaning things up.
So I suppose it's like things behind, not behind the scenes, but kind of like the lower level things that maybe some people may not be aware of, but they're the things like the pipeline, for the example, and the things like that you do day to day in terms of fixing those, but which obviously affects the whole performance of the entire product.
That's exactly that. A good example, for example, is generating aliases. So when you have a content type, you have a content type alias.
Yep.
When you have a property, you have an alias. I think in V4, each time we wanted an alias, we had a bit of code to create that alias. And we never did it the same. So you had 12 functions creating aliases, all different. And so part of the work is, well, switch to one only unique function that does it for everybody. And then the good thing is that as soon as you have an issue with aliases, you know where they are created, and it's very easy to fix. So the good thing is it becomes easier and easier to fix issues and to improve the platform because it's better structure and we can understand how it works.
Yeah, no, fantastic. So, so yeah, that's fantastic work, and it's good that you're fixing issues like that. So yeah, it's most appreciated. So today you're going to show us, like you said, a new feature that you've been working on. It's not part of the core just yet, but it's like an add-on or a side package. Is that right?
Yeah, it's because it's composed of two things. The whole part that manages the content cache and what the objects that you use to render a view in MVC has been changed over the past 2 years. And at one point, because it was becoming clean and nice, it was very easy to add a hook in some place. And the idea was that that hook would just change the object that is returned by the cache. So we're basically returning content. Because everything was centralized, it was very easy to say, well, before we return the content, we can let the user do something with the content. And then we had the idea that basically, instead of returning the internal type that sits in the cache in Umbraco, which is a cryptic type that you don't even want to know about, we could return something else that has a meaning. So that's what has been put into core, and it's public since 7.1.4. So if you're using 7.1.4, the real one today, you have that functionality. But you need to write your own classes that represent your content.
Yep.
Because all we do in core is just allow you to replace the content that's in the cache by your own thing, but that's all we do. So that's the first part, and it's in core. And the other part that is not in core is the models builder, which is something that will generate the classes for you, so you don't have to write them by hand.
So this is kind of like the second part. So the first part, you've created the hook in the core that allows you to kind of hook in and use this, and then you've got like the model generation, which generates all these C# classes for you that enable to use that hook.
Exactly, exactly. And in core, you have one. We call that the models factory, and you have it's actually an interface, and you have one implementation in core that's provided with Umbraco, but you could replace it by your own factory that would do the same thing, but in a completely different way. So it's very open. We provide one solution that we think is a good one, but I know that people working on code first want to create their own factory to see whether they can use their own classes as models, etc., etc.
Okay. So should we take a look, and maybe you can step us through this model builder stuff then?
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, let's go. So I'm going to share the screen. So the one I want to should be that one.
It's just loading, it seems.
Don't know.
It's either hung or...
What are you seeing? You're seeing my face?
Not seeing anything. It's...
Okay, let's try again. I want to share that screen. Doesn't like it. Let's try again. I want to share that screen. Fine. Okay. Do you have it?
Not yet, but sometimes it takes a little while. There it is. Yep.
Okay. What you see on the right part of the screen is the demo for this Hangout. It's a beautiful website. Actually,
it's beautiful.
Yeah, we paid quite a lot of money for that design to a big agency in Paris. It's a basic website. We have an About Us page which will tell who we are, and we have a news section. And in the news section, basically, we have a bit of text to say hello, and then you have the latest news. And when you click on one news, you have the details of that news item, so you know the title.
Yep.
You know the date, and you know a bit of text. And then you have links to other news items, and you can navigate through the news items and read them all.
Yep.
What I want to do is look at the view that generates that page. So it is on the left part of the screen. This is an MVC view, an MVC template. And we decide that we don't want to use dynamics in that view. So it's actually inheriting from Umbraco view page, and we're not going to use current page, which is dynamic object.
Yep.
Mainly because it looks very nice when you start using it, and then when you start doing complex things, well, it's not that nice anymore.
Yeah, you just kind of have to guess what properties are available and kind of remember on your dynamic. Is it this? Is this the alias of my property on this node? And if you make a typo, then it doesn't fail compilation. You just get nothing, and then you scratch your head.
So what I like to say is that dynamic in Umbraco gives you all the good parts about PHP, which
Yep.
is you don't even understand why it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Well, I personally don't like it. I understand that some people like it, and why not? I mean, but
Yeah.
I personally don't like it. So I write my views using only strongly typed content, which means that my model here is going to be an I-publish content, which means that if I want, for example, to display the title here, I have to use this crazy syntax, which is get property value as a string of alias title. And I have to remember that my alias is title. And then we have a customer requirement. It's an actual customer requirement where they say we want to have a real date for the news, the date it was published. But we also want to have a text date, because maybe we don't want to say it was June the 1st, but we want to say it was Q2 or holiday seasons or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a bit of logic saying if we have a text date, then display that date. Otherwise, pick the real one and convert it to string, etc. It's just horribly verbose, and you don't even know where is the HTML and where is the code, but it works. Yeah. And then we want to iterate over all the children, which are the news items. So we filter. We want them of type news item.
So I think that's sorry to interrupt. I don't think many people know that there is this method of types actually exists. So I only found out from watching your talk at Code Garden that this available kind of types filter actually exists.
It's basically the equivalent of, if I can do it, it would be something like where no document type, yes.
Yeah. So it's just a shorthand for writing this where filter.
Exactly, and yeah, it's so simple that we never made a big announce like, "Whoa, we have created of types." Many people.
No, but it's really nice. But yeah. I just don't think people know it's there.
Yeah. So yeah, it's there. Good point. And you will see that once we go with really strongly typed models, we will use a syntax. The same of type works. It basically comes from the link queries where you can do dot of type and a real CLR type, and it will filter the objects. So it's just a variation of that link query.
Okay.
And then we want to order by descending by date. So again, we have to do the get property value, blah 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 blah. It's just variables. It works. It's fine, but it's a bit ugly. What we wanted to do is to simplify all this, and what we would like to do is be able to do model.title and get the title. So today you can. The way you do it is, excuse me. In your website, you will install the package that you can download on the GitHub account of the models builder.
Yeah.
At the moment, because it's all beta, it's not in our project section, but ultimately it will be there. And you install the package as a normal Umbraco package. Or you can install it as a NuGet package. If your site is running from a Visual Studio solution, you can install it as a NuGet package on your Visual Studio. Awesome. It's up to you, depending on what you want to do.
So I presume it's only just adding the DLL then, or something along those lines.
When you install the package?
Yeah.
It drops a few DLLs, yeah, and the dashboard.
Okay, yeah.
So we're going to log into the backend. Well, let's say you go to the developer section, and you see that there is a new dashboard in the developer section, which is Models Builder. And by default, it does nothing. It just reports to you that the API is enabled.
Okay. Yep.
Visual Studio could talk to the website. And that the published content models factory is enabled, so that we will use the models if we have some model. But at the moment, we don't have models. So it's very basic. We just install the thing, and it's doing nothing. It's
okay.
And you need to configure it. So this is on the left of the screen. This is in the app settings part of your web.config.
Yep.
Where you will first give a namespace for your models.
Okay, so
we'll drop the classes somewhere. So as you can see, it's already in my web config file. So this is why on the right part you already have config.models namespace. Here, basically.
Okay.
And then you have various types of models that you can enable. So at the moment, everything is false, so nothing is enabled. That's by default. Because you need to know what we had a lot of discussion as to whether it should be automatic or not. But it's a bit complex, and it's better if people are aware of enable something manually. So the first thing we're going to enable here is the app code.
Okay.
I save here, and I need to load my page, and I go back to the model builder. Where you can see now that you have a big button to generate the models because you have enabled the type of model.
Okay.
You have a big warning which says that it will restart the application. We are generating code. This code sort of goes into APP code. As you know, in a .NET project, when you touch APP code or when you create a new DLL or anything like that, you restart it.
Yeah.
So this is just so people are aware that when they will generate, they will restart Umbraco. So if you keep doing that on a production website, restarting your website. Just
yeah, maybe not one for live environments.
Yeah. So I click generate. So it's at the moment it's generating things, and then it reloads. So okay, I'm happy. I have generated models. And then I can go to my going to the website to what has been done. Can you see?
Yep, I can see your Solution Explorer.
Okay. If if I go to the hidden parts, you have app data. In app data, you have all the logs, the examine things, everything.
Yep.
And we create a folder called models where we generate some files.
Mm-hmm.
We basically create one file per content type.
Okay.
For content and for members. So you have a member, you have an image, you have a page. This page I can do on my one that I created.
Yep.
You have file, folder, image. Those are the built-in media types.
Yep.
So we generate those files, and then in app code, put one file which is called build models, and this is the one that causes Umbraco to doing something in code, and it will restart, load all the generated .cs files, compile them, and use them in the site.
Okay.
The result of doing that is that I can go back to my view here. I should be able to remove basically the whole view. Okay.
Yeah, it's not so much. Yeah, it's not so much the front end that's the issue is more the it's us entering in the content in the back end. It's taking such a long time.
And I'm teaching because I already prepared the code, so I don't have to do it by hand. But you don't want to see me type for hours.
No, that's fine.
Okay. So basically, what I've done is I've said that my view page, the model should be a news item, and they should be in that namespace here, which is
okay.
And is really simplified because now I can display model.title, model.body. First, we will just show that it works, so you don't believe that I'm cheating. So you should see the same page. It works.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Awesome demo.
Each time Umbraco is going to restart, it's going to recompile the generated .cs files because they are basically considered as app code files. So you can look at them, you can view them, and they're going to be recompiled each time you restart Umbraco. So it takes a bit of time, but
I was going to say, does it add a lot of overhead in terms of starting up the application?
I don't think so because by default, anyway, Umbraco is going to compile global.asx and things like that. So there are a few things that are compiled. So if you have, I would say, less than 10 models, you have, I don't know, 5 or 6 files, which is the case of the demo. I think the overhead is pretty low.
Okay.
Now, this is not what I would recommend on a real production website with a lot of models and a lot of users. This is really very easy to do, but you have a small overhead. So it's, I would say, for a small website or a developer trying to experiment with the models and see how it works, etc., that's the best way to do it.
Okay.
Once you start doing big websites, there are different ways that I'm going to demo. One thing that you can see in my Visual Studio here is that it doesn't like all the strongly typed properties. It actually can't resolve them. So
so is this IntelliSense or the Visual Studio not picking up the model?
It's because basically the models they exist in the website when we run the website, but they don't exist in a DLL somewhere that you can include and reference for your code. So this is why this solution here is really for people who are doing everything in the Umbraco backend, so they don't have IntelliSense anyway.
Okay.
So they would basically edit their templates going somewhere like here.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And and then they have a syntax that is almost the same syntax as with Dynamics, but
Yep.
If I replace that by if I do something like that, it will not compile, and I will get an error on the website saying it doesn't work. So I won't spend hours trying to figure out why the title doesn't show.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but I have data in the database, I have data here, and why doesn't it show? And then usually an hour later you want to kill yourself when you're done.
Yeah.
But I don't have the things in Visual Studio.
Okay.
I'm going to clean the model, so I'm basically going to remove the build.models files. And because I deleted it, Umbraco doesn't know that the models exist anymore. So in theory, if I refresh the page, we should get an error because Umbraco has lost the models. It doesn't know where they are.
So that file in app code tells Umbraco that there is models in app data.
Exactly. We can't directly, and here you see it's dying, telling you zbu.demo4.core.models doesn't exist.
Yeah.
It's nowhere. We can't generate the files directly in APP code because otherwise, each time you put a file in there, it restarts the app. So if you generate 2 files, it will restart 10 times.
10 times. Yeah.
That's not what you want to do. So some people say, yeah, that's nice, but we have the overhead that we recompile everything.
Mm-hmm.
Could you instead compile everything for us and create a DLL? So I'm going to disable APP code models.
Okay. Yep.
You can't enable all sorts of models at once. We will throw an exception. You have to pick one way to do things. And then I will enable the DLL models. I need to go back to my developer dashboard.
Mm-hmm.
It looks basically exactly the same, and I can click on generate, and here it's generating the models. It's still generating files in APP data.
Okay.
But once it's done, it will compile everything and create a DLL.
Awesome. So then it puts that DLL in the bin folder, or does that actually still live in app data?
No, it goes in the bin file. So what we see is the view now is working. So obviously with code, APP code contains nothing. We still have the models here. And if I go to the bin one, I might have to close and reopen so we see it. In the bin one, you have...
Are you trying to show us your Solution Explorer?
Okay. Something that's on the other screen. Yeah.
Yep.
In the directory, you have a zbu.demo4.core.models.dll, mm-hmm. which contains the models. And they are in the bin folder, so they won't be regenerated each time Umbraco starts. It's a normal DLL. And so you use it as basically a normal DLL. I don't know if... And Visual Studio is happy. As you can see, nothing is...
Yeah, that's awesome.
Because it's a real DLL, so Visual Studio can see the DLL and use it.
Yeah.
That would be the intermediate way of doing things. That would be for people who don't want to use Visual Studio, but who don't want to have the restart of Umbraco and the penalty of recompiling everything. They would use the DLL. I will remove the DLL. What we see in the dashboard is that you have to click generate to generate the models. What happens if I go to settings and I add a new property to one of my content types?
Okay.
Nothing happens. So it's a new property, but the model doesn't get updated automatically. Mm-hmm. So I have to come back here and click generate. The reason for doing it that way is that we don't want the application to restart automatically each time it changes something in the content types.
Yep.
So you have to explicitly regenerate your models. It turns out that some people said, yeah, but, I know what I'm doing, and I want it to restart automatically.
Okay.
So you have an option in the app settings, which is the enable live models. So if you enable the other models and enable live models,
mm-hmm.
Whenever you make changes to your content type, we will regenerate the DLL. So it means that anytime you save a content type, it will restart Umbraco.
Okay.
So I personally think it's a bit dangerous, or maybe that's not what you want to do. But some people say, no, we're fine. Our developers would like it because they just changed one minor property, and it's better to have Umbraco restart than to have them forget to update the model, and then they would not understand what's happening.
Okay. Yeah.
It's really it's there. People can use it.
Personal preference.
Yeah. So you have DLL models, live models, which goes with APP code or DLL, because you can also have live APP code models. So anytime you change something, we regenerate the APP code files.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm going to disable everything. There is one that the APP data models is basically when you click generate, we generate the files, and that's it.
Okay, so you don't put in the flag to the app code folder to notify Umbraco that those data models exist.
Yeah, so if you just want to generate the models, obviously you will need to compile them one way or another, but it's up to you. But if you just want to see the files, you can enable APP data models, and then all we do is generate the files.
Okay, cool.
Okay, and the last way, so this, the DLL way, it would be the intermediate thing.
Yep.
And then we're going to go to the ultimate thing, or for the good guys.
The super pro user.
Yeah, exactly. This is for people who are using Visual Studio to do all their developments. What they're going to do is to install a Visual Studio application. So it's a file that you download from, at the moment, it's from GitHub, and you just double-click on it, and it installs in Visual Studio. And if you go to extensions and updates, you can see that it's installed on there, my Models Builder custom tool. And you need to configure it, so you go to the Visual Studio options, and down there you have the Models Builder options. And basically, you need to tell the extension how to talk to the website. So you give the address of the website, you give a user and a password, and it has to be a user that can reach the developer section.
Okay.
A bit of security. So not everybody can connect to your website and get and interact with your website. And then you will go to. In my solution, I have the demo4 is the website, and demo4.core is just a library that's used by demo4.
Okay. Yeah.
And in that library, I create a folder named models, but you can name it whatever you want. It's up to you. Yep. And in there, I create a file. I have called that file builder, but you can name it whatever you want. It doesn't matter. That file can be empty. I have a bit of comments in there, but it can be empty. It doesn't really matter. What's important is you go to edit the properties of the file.
Okay.
There it is. And this is a standard Visual Studio thing. You can see that you can set a custom tool, which is basically telling Visual Studio, when you save the file, run the tool.
Okay.
What Visual Studio uses to run the T4 templates, or when you have a .less file and it generates a .css file underneath, it's a custom tool, so it's used for a lot of things by Visual Studio. And I'm going to say that my custom tool is that one, DBU Customs Builder, and I save the file. And as you can see, something is happening.
Awesome.
And underneath, I have a lot of files that have been generated straight into my solution. So if I compile my solution, they will get compiled, and then they will be available in my views. And obviously, here, Visual Studio will be happy because it will see my models coming from the files. That's the way I prefer, because it's very clear and you can see what has been generated. So we're going to go into one model just to see how it looks.
Yeah.
If you look at the news items, there's a bit of blah 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 to say we've been auto-generated. Don't edit us, because if you edit that file, it's going and you regenerate, we overwrite.
Just replace. Yeah.
Okay. And then basically what you see is the part below that line it's just saying, okay, I have a news date property, which is of type date time, and it just returns this get property value date time news date. So it's very, what it does is very basic. It's just wrapping the very long syntax into a nice property name. So it's not, it looks like magic, but it's really fairly simple. The interesting thing that you can do once you're running in Visual Studio is that if you look at that class, it is generated as a partial class. So we basically generate a partial class, but if you want to add a property, or if you
if I want to add a new property to this news item model, how would I go about it?
I will add a class named a file named news item in parallel to my builder file. What you can see is that Visual Studio is complaining because it says there is a partial class already for that one, so you can't create a new one. So I have to say it's a public partial class news item. And then I can add anything I want. So if I want to add my own property, let's say, you know the logic about the dates for news items.
So if you want to fall back to like so you use first, and then if it's empty, you fall back to the kind of like the actual real date.
So what I want to do is I want to have a method that would be a get text date, and I will take a format. And what it's going to do, if this that has value news date text return this dot news text, and here I can use the strongly typed property. I don't have to do a get property value blah blah blah.
Yep, awesome.
Otherwise, I want to do return this dot news date, which is a date time, so I can do toString format
and pass the format.
Which means that in my view, when I have all that long thing here, I can replace that by at model dot get text date, and I have IntelliSense. So if you look at my model, it has the get text model, but it has the news date, and the properties are in there. It's IntelliSense, so we have it. So I will get text date using that string format.
Yep.
So we either return the string or the real date formatted using that format.
So that's now a loads much better in terms of readability. In terms of someone who maybe then picks up this file at a later date, who's not a C# coder and is the front ender, can still understand, okay, model.title, this is where the page title is going to be, this is where the date's going to be, and they can still modify the HTML markup around it quite easily.
Yeah, exactly. One big reason for doing all this is that on some projects I've been working on, what we've done is we've created the templates without any HTML. It's a very basic rendering. And then ask an agency to create the HTML around that. So to add all the fancy classes and things so it renders and it looks nice. And if they have to play with the get property value of string blah blah blah, they usually get lost.
Yep.
They start to mess with your code and it doesn't work anymore. If you give them something that looks like that view, it's fairly easy for them to understand that at model.title it's the title.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't have to be gurus to understand that type of things. So yeah, you can add new properties to your existing content types, and the builder, what it's doing is it's doing more than just generating things. It's also passing the things that are in there. So here I have let's give you an example. At the moment, as you can see, I have a member.generated.cs. This is for the member, when I get the member in a view. But let's say I don't want to generate that one because I'm not interested in that one. So I can use a global attribute in the builder file.
Okay.
It's an assembly attribute which says ignore content type with alias member. And then if I go back to Builder and I say run the custom tool, so it's basically regenerate.
Okay.
It will connect to Umbraco. It will update everything. And in theory, the member here should be gone. And it's not. So that's the demo effect. But
of course.
it's probably because the alias is not exactly member. What is it? No, it's gone. No, it's not gone.
Refresh the tree? Maybe collapse the tree and reload the tree?
Actually, I think it's Visual Studio dying. It's gone.
There we go. Let's go. So just by saving the file does the exact same thing as rerunning the tool.
Saving the file, yeah, does the same thing. Yep. And everything that's in the models folder is going to be passed by the tool to make decisions. So here, what I'm doing is, for example, I can say I want to rename the content type. So the alias is homepage, but the generated type should be home, not homepage.
Okay, so it could be quite easier to read or nicer to read.
For example,
for your models.
Especially if you're inheriting a solution that has been created a year ago with ugly names and you want to rename them as models. And you can do the same for properties. You can rename the properties. You can also tell the generator, please don't generate a property. For example, I think my Visual Studio is actually dying. I don't know why.
It's because you're doing a demo.
Yeah, probably bad. Okay, no, it's back.
Cool.
For example, in an image, you have all those properties named Umbraco bytes and Umbraco width, where you might want to just name it width because it makes more sense. So what I would do is, for example, create. Where's add? Hold on. I would create my own image class.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it needs to be probably partial class.
Okay. Yeah.
And I can use also. I need to reference my assembly, so I have the attributes, and then I can use rename property type, the one that has the alias. Sorry, it's Umbraco width. And please generate it with that name.
Cool.
Because that's better. I save, and then when I save that file, it's not the builder file, so it's not regenerating anything. I need to go to the builder file and do run custom tool. It's going to pass the files, so it's going to pass that one, and it sees that we have the attribute. And when it's done, if you look at the generated image file, you will see that the property for alias Umbraco width is now named width. So I have changed the name of the property.
Yeah, awesome.
What I might want to do is, for one property, is I want to implement it by myself. So I don't want the generator to generate it at all because I'm doing it by myself. Let's say I want to have a public integer height.
Mm-hmm.
Get return, I don't know, something stupid.
Yep.
Return 0. It's just okay. So I can use an attribute on that property saying it implement So I'm basically saying the property here in my file implements the property with that alias. So you don't need to generate it. I'm giving you an implementation for that property.
Okay, so this is kind of like an override as such.
Yeah, exactly. And it's telling basically the generator not to generate the property because we are doing it by yourself.
Okay, yeah.
There are a few other attributes like that allows you to
decorate the class.
Yeah, change what the tool is going to generate. And the last thing before I conclude, I think, is in my structure, if you look at my... I have created the document type structure such as random pages for every page, and then I have two content types that are sub-content types of random page.
Yep.
Okay. But if you look at how it's generated, I have a random page type that's been created, and I have a news item page, and the news item here inherits from random page.
Ah, awesome. So it knows about the inheritance of any inheriting kind of document types.
Exactly. So you could ask, for example, for all children of type random page, they would be either a news page or news item or whatever, but they're treated as a random page. And if you use mixins or what Morton calls compositions, where you can say a content type is made of several other content types,
Yep.
we would represent that with interfaces. So basically, the news item inherit from random page and implement 2 or 3 interfaces like I have a date, I have an image, or things like that, and even have the properties that go through.
Okay. So is that on the roadmap?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Because you said, is it on the roadmap, and then you went
Okay,
back.
I kind of. Okay, so I was asking, is it on the roadmap to work with Morton's implementation of kind of mix-ins or content types, as he calls them?
It's more than on the roadmap. It's that it's in theory it works already. So,
Okay.
Because basically the compositions and everything have been in core for about a year. It's only the UI that doesn't exist. So at the moment, you can't create compositions using the UI, but they've been supported by the runtime forever. I mean,
Awesome.
for a year. So the model generator already supports them. I'm not saying that we're not going to find a bug or two once people start use it a lot, but by default it's planned and we support it.
Awesome. Fantastic. So is there anything else you want to demo before we take a few questions?
I think no. I think the only thing that's really interesting to demo is just look at that view and
yeah, it's much neater, compact, easier to read.
Maybe the last thing to say is that what we're talking about is content models. So it's a model for a content item that's in Umbraco, and it's not a view model. So it's completely different from what people try to do with view models in Umbraco when they're doing MVC. My idea is that in most cases you don't need to have a controller and a view model, etc., to just render a page. It's not that bad to have a little query like that in the page. If it saves you from writing another class, which would be the controller, and learn about MVC controllers, model views, etc., etc. If it becomes too complicated, you might want to create your own controller and your own view models. But they would be entirely different things. So they would probably use the content models one way or another and embed them in a view model. But there are two different things. Because some people told me, but could we add a property to a content model that would be, for example, a homepage? So on any content, I could do content.homepage, and it would find the homepage of the website. It's not a bad idea, but it's already departing from the original model, which is you're just modeling the content, and you're not adding logic to do crazy things, etc., etc.
So I suppose that's the same example you've just given. So you could, what you're saying is probably not best practice to put that kind of for each query where you're kind of querying children that are news items into the content type model. So have model dot news items or something similar. So then you could just do for each news item in model dot news items, for example. So move that query out to the model.
Well, in some cases, it's all right to have it in the model. If like you have a news page, and under that news page you have news items, and you want property, which would be news items, listing all the children of type news item, then it's fine to define it in the model, because it really belongs to the model. What we're generating is only the properties. We're not generating things to query children.
Yep.
It would make sense for the news page to know about its children of type news item. What I'm saying is more, if it becomes more complicated, like when people said, could we have all the menu items available all the time? So on any content, I can do content.menu items.
Okay, so more a more obscure or complex query, which doesn't make sense for the context for that specific model.
Exact.
Okay.
There is a relationship between the news page and the news items. So
yeah, exactly. It makes sense to put that maybe in the query.
There is no relationship between the news page and the menu items, so the query should be somewhere else, but not in the model.
No, that makes perfect sense. No, it's a fantastic demo, and like you said, it's so it's a beta at the moment.
It's a beta at the moment because it's basically working.
Okay.
But we have some small things when people are using it, when they point out some issues. For example, we had one thing. We wanted to be able to generate the model without restarting Umbraco.
Mm-hmm.
They would be regenerated live in memory, and Umbraco would just keep running using the new models. And during the retreat before Code Garden, we had something working, and it was quite nice. And when people start to use it, we in fact realized that it just can't work. The way .NET works, it's not possible that it works. So it's going to be removed from the final version. So it's beta, but basically usable. It's quite stable.
Okay.
And, it should be released, I don't know, when we're happy with it.
Fair enough.
Summer.
No? Yeah, so around summertime.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. So yeah, should we take a few questions then in the meantime? I don't know if you can hear me, Stephan.
I can hear you.
Awesome, cool. So let's take a few questions. So I will take this one from Lee Kelleher. So he asks, since Umbraco internals have greatly improved, is there any part that you still consider, and he's putting quotes, completely broken?
How much time do we have?
We only have a few minutes.
I think the XML cache is still slightly broken or completely broken. The way we refresh that cache, it causes a lot of issues, especially when the volume of the content starts to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the macro engine is slightly broken, but it's almost clean now, so it should be fixed very soon.
Awesome.
That would be the two big parts that I would say are completely broken. Obviously, we need to know that we still have a lot of VF4 code in this system. A lot of things are still the old code, but it's been debugged, and it starts to look better now.
No, that's fantastic. No, that's really good. So I presume when version 8 comes along, you can kind of get rid of the real old legacy code around version 4 and kind of really retire that and kind of make the internals or the core system really lean and really neat.
That's the idea of the 8 at the moment. It's always a tough decision because probably that would mean we would break everything.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are going to complain, saying that they can't upgrade from 7 to 8, etc., etc. So, on one hand, you will have people like me or Shannon pushing to remove everything that's dirty and replace everything by new things. But on the other hand, Niels and Per manage the user base, and they have to make sure that people just don't leave Umbraco because they can't follow the path. So.
There's a happy medium then.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, cool.
Hopefully, yes, 8 will remove a lot of things that are considered ugly or dirty. We'll see.
Excellent. So we've got a question from James South. So he asks, are there still internal methods calling other methods marked as obsolete. He puts in quotes here, I recall seeing one recently, but not sure where. If so, are there any plans afoot to deal with them?
Plans is a big word, but we want to do it, yeah. I know that, for example, all the membership and users management has been refactored by Shannon quite recently. So in a lot of places, we are still using the old code. So yeah, we have code, we have internal code using obsolete methods because we haven't taken the time to make sure we're using the new methods everywhere.
Yep.
So the answer is yes. We still have some places where we use the old thing, but hopefully we'll clean everything up.
No, fantastic. So we got a question from Yevon. He asks, what can we expect from the new object cache you're working on? And for those that don't know, what is it?
Okay, what is it? It is the idea was to decide that the XML cache was just a component in Umbraco, and so it could be replaced by something else. The idea was to not keep the content in memory as a big XML thing, but as real objects, and that would be the models that we've seen today.
Okay.
So, because at the moment, when in an MVC view you do umbraco.typed content, 1, 2, 3, 4, what we do is we navigate the XML document, we find the XML fragment for that content, we create an object, we pass the XML, and we return that object. Each time you get the object. The idea would be to have that object cached in memory. So that
so the physical hydrated object as opposed to XML and then hydrating it back and forth.
Yeah, exactly. So it would be straight in memory, which means that all the MVC stuff will be much faster and much cleaner. And then on top of that, we would run, it's called an XPath navigator or something that basically allows you to navigate it as if it were XPath. So we would still support XSLT.
I was just about to lead on to that question. So with you changing this this cache, XSLT will still be around then?
Yeah, we would still support XSLT, and probably a little bit slower than what it is today. Because basically today at the moment, the objects are an abstraction on top of XML, and we would decide that the objects are the real thing, and that XML is an abstraction on top of the objects. So we just change
swap the order around.
Yeah, exactly. The other benefit is that at the moment, anytime you publish something, we basically create a copy of the big XML thing, make changes in there, and then swap it with the one that was in memory. So if you have a lot of documents and a good number of editors working at the same time, it does strange things in memory. You have a lot of memory that's used, and you have concurrency issues, etc., etc. Whereas if it's not a big document but single objects, you can replace an object by another one when it's published, for example, without changing the entire cache. So and then you can think of things like you might not want all the objects to be in memory. You could decide that some of them get flushed from memory if they are not used for some time. Then when you ask for them, obviously we need to read them from database or somewhere, but maybe for some objects that are not used a lot of the time.
So you could hydrate them as and when you needed them.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the concepts behind the cache. The situation is that there is a prototype running that works using objects and that supports XSLT, Razor, the new MVC, etc., etc., and it works quite well. But it's not finished yet, and I think it's my top priority at the moment to have it working.
Fantastic. So that's, I presume, in the distant future, whilst you work on it and kind of polish it and get it ready for a later release.
Yeah, I really would like to be able to release something that works probably beta or something like that within the next 10 months, I would say.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So. So we got one final question before we wrap up for today. So we got a question from Craig Cronin. And he asks, what is the current status on the documentation and what are the plans for updating it? I don't know if he's referring to, one, the model builder stuff. Is there any documentation behind that? And then I think he may be just talking more broadly about the project in general.
About the models builder, there is on the GitHub account, on my GitHub account, where you can download the code, there is a wiki with some pages that document how it works.
Okay.
So it should be documented in there. About the global Umbraco documentation, that's a much broader question, and I don't know what to answer. I suck at writing doc. You know?
I think all good developers suck at writing documentation. I think it's a common problem and a problem that's going to be here to stay. But I think you guys are doing a good job, and documentation is coming from you guys at the core and the community with people like Yevon doing kind of key contributions as well. So
yeah, that's probably something that's worth being mentioned, is that people think that contributing is only writing code and rewriting the content cache, but really I've been exchanging emails with Yevon over the past week regarding the property values converters.
Yep.
He keeps asking, can I do this, can I do that, what is the logic behind this and that, and he told me he's writing docs and he's going to update the Umbraco documentation with the result of the questions, and that's a very, very precious contribution.
Yeah, exactly.
That's very interesting, because instead of documentation written by people who have been deeply into the topic for a year, and so everything seems obvious. It's written by something.
Yeah, it's like, oh, of course, you just do this. But if your head's in the code, like you say, things to you that might be obvious, for other people it might not be so obvious.
Yeah, so I think it's really, and even removing the obsolete doc, it may not look like a very exciting thing, but if somebody wanted to go into our and start pointing at everything that's obsolete and just remove it from there, or just put a bit of text saying this is obsolete, that would be a very precious contribution too. So it's things that contribution is not only about writing code.
Yeah.
And this is where community can help a lot, is asking questions. I think we're pretty much available to explain everything.
Yeah.
And that's the same for the models builder. So I really encourage everybody to just ask questions. So if you use it and there's something that you're like, oh, it's stupid, why do I have to do this? Don't complain
just
alone
ask.
Just ask and just say, do I really have to do this? Because in most cases you don't. It's just something we haven't fixed.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. No, fantastic. Okay, I think we'll leave it there and wrap up for today. It's been fantastic talking to you, Stephan, and I really look forward to using the Models Builder. I think one thing we didn't touch on, where can we actually download it? What's the full GitHub URL?
It's my GitHub account, so it's github.com/zpqrtbnk.
Okay, so your Twitter handle,
yeah.
The most easiest one to remember, of course.
Exactly.
Yep. And then we can just find it on your GitHub account.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll post a link somewhere after this show. But fantastic. Great talking to you, Stephan. Have a great weekend, and I'll speak to you sometime soon.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Stephan. Bye. Bye.